My name is Mahesh Mudda. I am the chairman for this session. The session is very interesting session because it says tall building and cities, which is need of the day, what we have been talking. The kind of population we are talking here, we have no other option but to go high-rise. This conference has been organized, and this conference cannot be the solution for what the subject we are talking about, but I'm sure this will be the good takeaway thoughts for all of us to really think and take the advantage of the experts from the field to take their opinion on this subject, how we can really, because change for the good. Change is the name of the game we talk, and without that we can't succeed. And our chairman, he happens to be one of the first to construct the high-rise buildings. Today we are talking about this subject. 30 years back, 40 years back, when because things were not so advanced, that time also because they could do it successfully. Only now we'll have to think and worry about how sustainable buildings we can make, how best infrastructure we can create while going vertically, because we have no other option. And we have third speaker, Mr. S.K. Das, who is well known from our India, and he has got the architecture from in Delhi and practice all over our country.
Well, it's not easy to introduce oneself. I'm just S.K. Das, architect, urban designer, and city planner. The only thing I can say is that we run a very granular and textured practice, and a practice that spans across architecture, urban design, and planning. And for me, the greatest crisis today in the urban environment, one of the great crises is the disconnect between planning and architecture. And I think that reconnection is very essential. Anyway, this presentation is titled City, Multiplicity, and Specificity. It's a specific viewpoint coming from a practitioner of 35 years, 34 years, and obviously rooted in one's own personal biases and convictions. India's urbanization reflects the nature of its economy. And let's not forget that like most Asiatic economies, India has a very large informal sector, which is alive and kicking, unlike most other Asian economies where it's slowly on its withering away. We have a very vibrant corporate sector. We also have equally vibrant informal, non-corporatized economy. So we have global citizens, people who interact with the global processes, and we have a large number of people who don't. And all this takes place within a democratic political system. It's a full-blown democracy, unlike some other countries that we may have talked about earlier. And so it has many sectarian interests, all of whom negotiate for space. And it's a tremendous challenge for the government to mediate and take into account various interests and sort of navigate through all these interests and conflicting interests and produce something. And the large majority of people who require infrastructure and services cannot simply afford to get those. So this is what I call a condition of upheaval. It is a condition of a sort of planning war. So the existing places are subjected to conflicting aspirations, and the city seems to be made up of irreconcilable parts. Now, again, the challenge here is to have to reconcile these parts. So the city is a turf on which sectarian interests negotiate this space, and it's a tremendous responsibility. The affluent obviously have raised their bar on consumption. With globalization, even the middle classes are able to do it. So we have a large population that is very aspiring, is able to spend, is expecting better facilities and infrastructure, quality accommodation, and what have you. And the poor, who have so far been excluded because of the contempt, and fortunately over the last few years, this contempt has translated into a positive, looking at it more positively, how to accommodate the poor and pursue inclusive growth as our government is swearing by. Those who run the city, they dream of a global metropolis comparable to the booming cities elsewhere. And those who service the city don't want their position threatened. So there's a set pattern and set way of delivering services, and that has to continue for them. And the governments are oblivious of the process of the city's manufacturing. They simply underestimate the infrastructure requirements, the services that we need, and to support the population that we have and the increasing population in our cities. And investors and real estate developers obviously want faster reproduction of the money on their investment. So urban management, governance, and spatial ordering interplay with issues concerning community and social formations, and the freedom of choice and the ordering of urban space and services. Now, Indian cities are granular, they're multi-layered, and they're very finely textured. The many layers are like parallel and interdependent cities. There is no one city, there are many cities. They exist, they coexist, they're interdependent, they are overlapping, and each city it represents very specific needs and aspirations, and the sensibilities or combinations thereof. They together represent cultural diversity. This is the city of Jodhpur. I won't talk about it in the morning. Charles Correa also touched upon this point, a city that is got 100% ground coverage in some respect. These are street scenes where we simply cannot have that degree of so-called order that comes out of Western sensibilities. We still have to cope with lifestyles, aspirations, livelihood issues, and everything. Mumbai. So in this scenario, I think it is high time we discard the conventional land use zoning and even master planning based on monofunctional spaces. I mean, Delhi is a classic example of a monofunctionally, a strict zoning and strict land use controls separating everything, workplace from residences from commercial developments, etc. Then the standard models of separations have begun to crumble in any case, if you look at what's happening in the market, what's happening on the ground. And the gap which is left behind needs to be filled in by creating new urban conditions, some of which we just saw examples of. But these conditions have to be sustainable and inclusive in a democratic society. Global city cannot conform to a single template. What we have to do is each city with its unique multiplicity has to, and specific contextual tensions, must reinvent and rediscover itself, innovate and renew itself. And in this respect, I think architecture ought to engage with community and civil society. It cannot be isolationist. And today's architectural isolation makes no sense at all beyond property boundaries. And that must dissolve. Rising prices and affluence and global aspirations imply that India should and will have tall buildings. But these have to happen in a mosaic of low-rise developments. The genesis of tall buildings will come from developers and investors with staying power, and users who obviously have the paying capacity and are looking to satisfy their personal needs. Now, I just give 3 examples, 3-4 examples of our work. This was a project we did, a new town on the outskirts of Delhi. It's called Crossings because it's located between Delhi, Ghaziabad, Noida, and Greater Noida. So our pursuits of high-rise building in this project and in Delhi in general happens in the broader urban framework and not just as an isolationist exercise. It's inspired by the multiplicity of grains and textures. It takes into account specific urbanity of the place. It digs deep into sociocultural specificities and views the public domain as an overlay of multiple sensibilities. This was a site of 600 acres, out of which we did the master plan in detail for 300 acres. We engaged with the city. In the middle, what you see is a sewage treatment plant that pre-existed. So we negotiated with the city to utilize the treated effluent and recycle it into the city as water bodies and lakes. And we also engaged with the slum community that is existing to the north of this site along the national highway, that slowly they could be absorbed into the city, and the city could become an ever-expanding city. And as they are given accommodation in place of their slum houses, which has to be done through their associations and not individually, more and more land is available to this group of developers to expand the city and to finally have a face on the national highway. So there's a land sharing process that at work. Now, the principle of connectivity and density has guided this development. High density, very well connected. Internally, the plan connects buildings with courtyards and the courtyards with parks and gardens, and they in turn connect to the central park. And there is a tremendous emphasis on cycling and walking. Now, these strategies were used to achieve urban space, creating a central park, as I said, emphasizing the provision of accesses, and leveraging the use of the forest and the STP for the community's benefit. This is a landscape framework. And here I want to make here is that the high-rise buildings that I'm going to show here coexist with horizontal buildings. And together they produce high densities. And the landscape platform that we create is a continuous system of landscape, that sort of framework that runs right across the township, almost like an arterial system or a system of veins. In the middle, you have the water body, which is 2.5 kilometers long, which is also going to be used for boating and leisure and recreation. So I just talked about the negotiation. One was the negotiation with the city to recycle the waste from the sewage treatment plant, and the other was land sharing with the communities, existing communities around, who would participate in the project and gradually get absorbed and not excluded. Now, this is typically shows the cycling and the walking possibilities within the township, biking possibilities within the township, which is unlimited and extensive. And this is what the urban design or the image looks like. There are selectively buildings which are 40 floors, strategically located. Now, each of these large pockets is treated as a superplot. Now, by having a superplot, we are able to manipulate the FAR, have low-rise buildings for middle classes and high-rise luxurious building for the upper income group. And in between, even if the official designated density is up to 3, they balance out, and at the overall site level, it comes down to 1.8 to 2, something which Charles mentioned in the morning. It happens to coincide with that analysis. Now, these buildings come with a very strong social, cultural, and recreational context. They have access to everything. Unless we give these accesses, these facilities, and these open spaces, and this public domain, these high-rise buildings wouldn't make any sense at all. Main streets, where the setback of the buildings are aggregated onto the street. There are no compound walls, no gating of the properties, and they all open out, and together we get an extensive, sort of expansive access way with shopping and walking street, etc. The second example is something we did 10 years back when the Delhi Metro Rail came in to the older part of Delhi. The Metro Rail Corporation and DDA, Delhi Development Authority, got together and engaged us to do a redevelopment proposal, something they called a redevelopment proposal for 5 square kilometers of land in the heart of Delhi. But for us, it is not just a redevelopment proposal, it was a redevelopment proposal, it was a proposal for urban renewal, upgrading, reconstruction, landscape development, heritage development, transportation, etc. So at the end of it, we had a basket of 28 projects that together constituted the so-called broader umbrella of redevelopment. The site is very, very central. It is adjacent to the walled city, the medieval walled city of Delhi. And in green, and the Yamuna River, which is shown in blue, and 3 metro. But for us, it is not just a redevelopment proposal, it was a redevelopment proposal, it was a proposal for urban renewal. Together constituted the so-called broader umbrella. And on the top, you have the colonial development of bungalows built during British times with possibly the lowest densities. And so the context was very diverse. So you have the medieval wall city, you have the bungalow zone, you have the riverfront, you have the squatter pockets, you have informal sector. Then the site has multimodal transportation possibilities, which is 3 metro stations, interstate bus terminus, a railway station, and it's a heritage zone. It's a tourism destination with a myriad of monuments and gardens. It's a socio-cultural marker for the entire city of Delhi in terms of food, walking, and just smelling and experiencing the city. And it's also a landscape which is very significant on a metropolitan scale. We have old markets, tiny shops. We have the monuments, the metro station, and Jama Masjid, etc., surrounding the site. Now, these diverse contexts represent maximal conflict waiting to be resolved. what we did was we treated this development by treating each part as disparate elements of a jigsaw puzzle and then knitting it together in a seamless flow, with the landscape becoming the binding element. These are the master plan, the wall city in yellow, and in the middle, all the different parts are, we have budget hotels, we have real estate development, we have heritage properties that are conserved, then we established a garden that is of as much significance as the central vista of Lachin's Delhi to symbolically recoup open space for the old city, which doesn't have any open space whatsoever. Now, from the city wall, there was a regulation that within 200 meters you cannot build anything. So adjacent to the city wall, we developed a heritage park where people can bring out their wares from Wall City and display and sell from there. It's a heritage park to walk through. And from here, you can actually take a walk through Old Delhi. And there's different components of the project, as I said. And the core of the project was a real estate development. Because when we did this project, we interacted with all the public agencies dealing with infrastructure, from water supply board, sewerage board, electricity department, to transportation department, and they were all party to this exercise. And the exercise was constantly informed by them and endorsed by them. So this is typically a heritage walk that can take place through Old Delhi, starting from Kashmiri Gate, which is a historic gate, one of the gates to Delhi. And what we also did, that the metro line, which connects 3 metro stations, we developed an underground walking possibility, a pedestrian precinct that is partly underground, partly open, periodically opening up, periodically sort of getting covered, which absorb the informal sector and the bazaars in those. And basically the walk, I mean, it appears very simple, it's just a walk, but the idea of a walk is that it combines informal business, it provides transportation linkages, it links the heritage monuments that are the diverse places and locations, and it's also links with the gardens and parks, and has the hawkers precincts. In the middle, we had the possibility of real estate development, which, and this project has been approved by the Delhi government in principle. At some day, this will be put up for bidding process in the market and given to real estate developers. And the FAR at the plot level here is currently 3.5, but it can go higher, knowing the circumstances that are now demanding higher floor spaces. But what we are concerned about is the ordering of the buildings in a manner that the promoters or the investors can maximize their profit. They're not restricted by a very strong urban design that limits their possibilities, but at the same time, the projects will continue to have a commitment to the city. So what we had was we sort of have 3-4 levels of basements. Then the lower 4 floors will be horizontal slabs that will accommodate all the commercial, social, and cultural facilities only, and nothing else. And on top, there will be the towers, which are mixed-use towers, which are going to have a mixture that the market will dictate. It could have hotels, it could have service suites, it could have residences, it could have offices, and there wouldn't be any restriction on that. And to this extent, the zoning plan for that zone within the master plan was modified, and this proposal was incorporated as an integral part of Delhi's new master plan. So what I want to say here, it is not an exercise in selling an image, it's an exercise in creating a framework and a foundation to encourage new developments, and any number of architects could come in, the developers would bring in their own architects, and they could celebrate architecture, but an architecture that is not exclusive, architecture that integrates with the city, gives something back in return to the city. So most of the existing settlements on this site, that is the squatter areas, are being relocated, rebuilt on the site, and they are not dislocated. And that is seen as a positive and not a burden. Thus, what we have as a result is a collage knit together by a landscape flow, where the formal, the traditional, and informal are woven together in a symbiotic relationship, and without losing their own internal character or their specific interests and sensibilities. The question I often ask is, I mean, this is very relevant for Mumbai, sorry. I think the initiative will largely come out of the civil society. And when the initiative comes from civil societies, there is no escape for architects and planners but to engage with the city and with the civil society. As new social theories emerge in the developing world on the nature of civil society, I propose that we look at multiplicity and specificity as inherent guiding principles of looking at cities and designing within cities. And they challenge the existing notions of planning. Now, this is a housing we did for senior civil servants in Delhi, rental housing for 100 apartments. This was a site right in the heart of the city. Joint secretaries live here. They're traditionally used to living in villas or in semi-detached houses with sprawling gardens. Now, if they had to live in the middle of the city, in the heart of the city, they had to live like everybody else, under high densities. So this battle went on. This is the first time Government of India gave a project of staff housing to private architects. Since independence, this has been done by CPWD, the Central Public Works Department, and the designs, type designs hadn't changed. So we had this 2 years battle. Finally, we won, and the project went ahead and got built and got occupied in 2002. What we have is little over a hectare of site and 100 apartments. It is a planning exercise, it's an urban design exercise, it's a housing exercise, and it's an exercise in providing, encouraging community formation. So the structure of the place is that we have north-south pedestrian spine in the middle, then the east-west podium under which cars are parked. Delhi's temperature ranges between 4 degrees to 47 degrees. So it is wrong to say it's just hot, arid climate. It is equally cold desert. So we had to create possibilities of wide streets which are very sunny and open, can be very useful in the winter, and narrow lanes and alleys which are very, very summer friendly. And then what happened? We have a number of secondary and tertiary pedestrian connections that defined the area as forming a city. And we connected this to the neighborhoods beyond. We did not build boundaries around it, but rather we opened it out so people living across could use it as a thoroughfare and almost like walking through one part of the city to another. This is how it looks. The footprint covered the entire site. No real setbacks. Like the slide I showed you of Jodhpur city, this is a very high density city, very high ground coverage, 4-story development, 1 apartment on the ground floor, 1 on the first floor, and 2 apartments on second and third floor, so nobody walks beyond 2 floors to reach their house. And then the connections are something that there are internal open spaces that belong to the community, obviously, and there are external spaces that is shared with housing clusters adjoining. This is how it looks. So what we have is, as I told you, the podium, which is running east-west actually, but in this drawing it looks north-south. Then the pedestrian street that's running perpendicular. And a third sort of major street, which I call the Old Delhi Street. And it is exacting of a street from the medieval wall city, with all its irregularities and informality, with events taking place along those. And this is a tenanted neighborhood. But the tenant status notwithstanding, we chose to treat the inhabitants as simply users, as participants in the environment, and not consumers of that environment. Now, most architectural works consign people to being reduced to the level of being consumers of an environment, as if they have no rights over it, they can't act upon it, they can't add to it. So that sort of dumbfool kind of perception of common people is something that's highly questionable. So what we had this is a photograph taken 4 months after the place was occupied. People started generating their own green, both in public spaces, as well as around their houses and between houses. So today when people visit this place, they think it is a real estate project built by a developer. And it is ownership housing. It is exactly the opposite of that. It's tenanted housing. People pay rent. It is built by Central Public Works Department, which is not very well known for quality. And it is built on a landscape platform where more than 50% of contribution on landscape comes from inhabitants. And there is obviously a case for continuing this cultural tradition and constantly modernizing it and creating this possibility alongside pursuing high-rise buildings. Now, this is my last project. We are also building the 4 of the tallest towers in Delhi at the moment, in Delhi, in Noida. This is called Celeste Towers, residential towers for the towering aspirations of the Indian rich and the globalized citizen. Now, what the point I want to make is even a standalone project on a small site can represent a microcosm of the city and provided it offers all the facilities and infrastructure, and not in the absence of it. So the ground coverage in this project is 9%. The towers are like 2 little flies, and 91% of the site is open. And the 3.5 acres of land, it's targeted at global Indians with high level of affordability. It is 30 apartments, 1 apartment per floor, and 2 towers. The emphasis is to create a substantial collective or social domain with recreation, health, and other facilities. The dwelling typology in its basically combines 2 aspects of the Indian family, which is the globalized aspect of the Indian family and the traditional face of the Indian family. So it's a kind of zoning where you have a public zone and a private zone. Then you have social zone, you have sort of functional attributes fitting into these zones, and then transitional zones in the house. And that sort of generates the plan. The landscape, as I said, the ground table here is very high. You get water at the level of 7 meters. So we recycle that water and we create a water park. And the whole site is basically a public garden. And this is the towers. They are modern, they are international in style, but they have strong cultural roots. And the ground is converted into either water or a forest, even trees rising over buildings and on top of buildings. Thank you.